Okay, it just got dark out of nowhere. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel. I'm wearing the same clothes as my last video because I thought I would just film my intro for my next video the same day I filmed my last video. Anyway, yeah, today I'm gonna be working with Brandy. I'm gonna be showing you guys all the things I've done with her as a yearling. Obviously she's not a yearling anymore. I wanted to bring you guys along, and right now she's at the point where she's about to have the saddle on, but I don't want to just skip everything that I did before. I think I do have some clips of little Brandy, so I'll try to find them and maybe insert them in this video. But yeah, this is what this video is gonna be. It's gonna be all the things I did with her as a yearling. I know there's definitely gonna be some stuff I leave out just because I always forget to show you guys things, and then I realized like weeks later after I already uploaded the video. Again, disclaimer, I do not consider myself a horse trainer. This is just me showing you guys what I did with my horse. Feel free to do your own research, but yeah, this is just me bringing you guys along on what I did with my little filly. So hopefully you guys enjoy. Please don't forget to subscribe and ding that little bell so you guys can get notified every time I upload. Also, like this video if you like it. And yeah, that's it. Let's go ahead and get on into the video.
Alright, you guys, so I'm going to go ahead and share with you some of the foundation type work I did with Brandy when I first got her. She was already a 1-year-old, and it was very important for me to make sure I gave her a good start. I did a little bit of everything with her, some light groundwork, some desensitizing, everything that goes into handling, and yeah. Oh, and when I first got her, we were boarding in a barn in Miami, just in case you're wondering, because once you start seeing the clips of baby Brandy, you'll notice it's a different place. But yeah, I'm not going to go in any particular order, so let's just go ahead and get started. Okay, so everyone knows that grooming is one of the most important tasks when it comes to taking care of a horse. It's one of those things that will follow a horse throughout its whole life, and it's a very important part of keeping them healthy. So why not make sure they're comfortable with every part of the process, right? So I always made sure to brush Brandy all over her body to get her used to the feeling and make sure she was comfortable. I would brush under her belly, her tail, legs, just everywhere. And I would also try to use different kinds of brushes. Some brushes might be a little bit too rough for sensitive areas like their belly or faces, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, it's basically just desensitizing her to being groomed. Now the same thing goes for touching. I would tap and rub my hands all over her to make sure there weren't any areas she was uncomfortable with or nervous about. I would play with her tail, touch her belly, her face, legs, and Brandy actually hated having her ears touched. She would literally swing her head in the opposite direction to avoid having them touched. She's so much better about that now, but as you can see, sometimes she's still a little iffy about it. It's barely noticeable, but what I'll usually do is use the pressure and release method. Well, in this case, it's contact and release. I'll touch her ears and keep the contact until she keeps her head still, and then I'll release. Like here, you can see her moving her head a little bit, but as soon as she keeps it straight and still, I release and I say, good girl. I also worked on picking up her feet a lot when I first got her. I picked her hooves regularly and tried to simulate what the farrier would do just to get her ready and used to the whole process. At first, she was obviously uncomfortable, but I would just pick up her foot and hold onto it until she relaxed and stood still. Then I gently let it go. Here's a picture of baby Brandy with the farrier. Oh my gosh, she was so little and so cute. I also did a lot of lateral flexing with Brandy, teaching her to give into pressure and getting her light and supple. Eventually, when she's older and ready to be ridden, this will help with her one-rein stop if there were ever an emergency. But all I do is just apply a little bit of pressure on the lead rope, asking her to give me her head on the side, and as soon as she gives it to me a tiny bit, I release the pressure. Now that she's older though, I sometimes hold the pressure a little longer to teach her to stay at her side for a little while instead of just flinging her head back as soon as she touches. Okay guys, so one of the most important parts of groundwork is keeping your horse's hind end away from you. You do this by teaching your horse to disengage their hindquarters. This ensures your safety in case your horse decides to kick or step back, and it also allows you to have more control on the ground. In the future, when your horse is ready to be ridden, this will be an important part of your emergency brakes in case anything were to happen. But I like teaching this because it makes the rest of the groundwork and desensitizing so much easier, because then you no longer have to worry about their hind end coming into your space or anything like that. Ours is still a tiny bit sloppy, but Brandy gets it. The goal is to have their inside leg cross in front of their outside leg as they move their butt away from you. Sometimes I use the lunge whip, sometimes I use the lead line, it just depends. I always make sure to desensitize her to it. I no longer have to use anything, just by me bending over and looking at her hip, she moves off. But just for the sake of this video and showing you guys, I'm using a lunge whip or a lead line. I actually came across a really cool YouTube video by Andrea Tsao where she talks about the importance of disengaging a horse's hindquarters, and she teaches it step by step. So if you guys are interested in watching that, I'll leave her video linked in my description box. And yeah. Okay, so one of the most important things for me personally is to teach my horse how to walk behind my shoulder and stop walking every time I stopped walking. It sucks seeing people getting dragged by their horses, or instead of the person leading the horse, it's the horse leading the person. One of my favorite things to do when I first got Brandy was take her on walks around the barn. So, of course, it was essential for me to teach her this early on. I would use a small hand crop and gently tap her chest until she took a slight step back, and then I'd stop. Sometimes I would also use a lead rope and swing it in front of us every time I stopped, until she stepped back, and then again I'd stop. The most common thing that would happen when I first started teaching her this was that she'd swing her butt around every time I'd stop. And then all I'd do was just correct her by bringing her butt back and backing her up again. So eventually she would just stay straight and back up on her own every time I stopped. And once she got it, I would practice it at different speeds, like a slow walk, a fast walk, a trot, always making sure she never passed me. Here's a little clip of baby Brandy. We were trotting for the farrier to see how her hooves looked, but this is a perfect example of when something like this can come in handy. Alright, so like I mentioned before, when I first got Brandy, I absolutely loved taking her on walks around the barn. When they're young, there really isn't too much you can do with them, so that was something I really looked forward to and enjoyed, and so did she. It was a great opportunity to bond and expose her to different environments, views, and surfaces, and when I first got her, we boarded at a barn in Miami, so there was always a lot going on, which I thought was great for her. There were always people riding, an arena, cows, banners, just everything. And I would walk her over logs, branches, through puddles, over rocks and weird surfaces. And sometimes I even put boots on her without wrapping them tightly, and I would walk her around just to give her a feel for them. I think it's super important to expose horses to as many things as possible when they're young, just to desensitize them and set them up for success in the future. Now the same thing goes with the horse trailer. I wanted to expose her to it as much as possible and make sure she had a good experience with it at a young age. My intention was never to actually load her. I just wanted her to do her own thing, and I never pushed her or rushed her. I kind of just hung out with her while she investigated. And eventually she figured out on her own that it wasn't this huge scary trap. She was a very curious baby, so she never really had a problem with it. And doing all this actually sets her up for success when the time comes to actually teach her how to load and haul. Okay, so over the years, I've acquired this habit of always hand grazing the horses after a ride, a groundwork session, a bath, and if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably seen a lot of that on my stories. I did this a lot with Brandy, especially when she was a yearling, and I love doing this not only because it's a chance to bond and spend time with my horse, but it also gets them used to stepping on their lead line. I know that sounds weird, but it teaches them not to panic when they feel the pressure on their poll or face, and it also teaches them to give in to that pressure. I've seen a lot of people do this by leaving the halter and lead rope on while their horses are in their stalls, but I've heard so many crazy stories of horses getting caught on things, so I just prefer to let them graze with a long lead line while I keep an eye on them. Okay, another thing I used to do a lot with Brandy was pony her while riding Crystal. This is a really useful way to teach a young horse how to yield to pressure, and it also desensitizes them to having like a human high above them, and to the sounds a saddle might make. And if you guys follow me on Instagram and you watch my stories, you guys all know about my crazy squeaky saddle. But yeah, it helps them gain confidence, and it teaches them how to move with another horse close beside them. And it's another great way of exposing them to new environments while having another horse there to teach them the ropes. I mostly ponied her around our old barn, but there was actually a really nice short trail right next to it, so I sometimes took Brandy down there, but it was so nice and so much fun. Here are some pictures of baby Brandy when I used to pony her on Crystal. She was so cute. Alright guys, now moving on to desensitizing. Desensitizing is such a huge part of starting a horse. It helps develop trust, and it's a great way of preparing them for anything they may encounter. The goal is to teach them to think through potentially scary situations instead of instantly reacting. Doing this helps create a confident, brave horse both on the ground and in the saddle. With Brandy, I started off by desensitizing her to the lead rope. I would toss it over her back, wrap it around her legs, swing it above her head and at her sides, and smack it against the floor sometimes. Once I felt like she was completely comfortable with that, I'd move on and do the same thing with the lunge whip. I'd toss it over her back, smack it against the floor, crack it a couple times, making sure she wasn't scared of it. Now, you can get as creative as you want with this. I literally would jump around her, throw my hands up in the air, clap, do crazy spins, jump on her, as you can see. I was out of shape there, but yeah, you can use anything you have to desensitize. Sometimes I would use a light saddle pad and just play with it, toss it in the air, throw it over her back, let her smell it. She was really good. I don't know if you guys can hear, but we had a lot of cows, so you could hear them mooing in the background, which I thought was really good for her. But yeah, look how cute she is. She was so little. Sometimes I would make her walk over it. If I was wearing a jacket that day, I would throw my jacket on her. And if I was drinking water, I would use my plastic water bottle once I finished it to roll it over her body, squeeze it in my hands, because you know how it makes that crunching sound. Over here, I'm using a sheet of bubble wrap. It kind of makes the same sounds as a bag. But yeah, plastic bags, horses are terrified of them. So that's something really good to use to desensitize. But yeah, whatever you have, as long as you're exposing them to different sounds, sights, and movements. Another thing I did a lot with her was whenever I would work Crystal out in the arena and there was no one there, like no one was riding, I would bring Brandy out with us and I just let her hang out while I lunged Crystal, or I did some groundwork with Crystal. I'd let her explore the arena and play. There was always barrels out, there were jumps out, banners, cows, cow dummies, flags, like everything, you guys. So I loved bringing her out with us and I felt it was really good for her. Another thing that was very important for me to desensitize her to was a spray bottle. Here in Florida, we have a lot of bugs, so making sure she was comfortable with the fly spray was very important. I just rinsed an old fly spray bottle and filled it with water in order to work with her without drenching her in bug spray. So I always practice spraying her down with my spray bottle filled with water to get her used to the mist and to the sounds the nozzle makes. I sprayed her legs, belly, just everywhere, and if she moved or walked off, I would just continue to spray until she stood still, and then I would stop spraying. I would also get her used to the bottle being up by her face, and then once she was used to that, I would lightly spray her face. Of course, when it comes to using actual fly spray, I make sure to avoid her eyes and nose. Horses will most likely be sprayed down by something throughout their life: fly spray, show sheen, some coat spray or medicine, so it's super important to make sure they're used to it. Now the same thing goes for being hosed down. This is also something a horse is going to encounter a lot throughout its life. When it's time for a bath, getting rinsed off after a sweaty workout, when they're hurt or sore, basically at least 3 times a week. So making sure they're desensitized not only to the water but also to the hose itself is super important. I rinsed Brandy off a lot when I first got her. It's always hot here in Florida, so I always brought her out to cool her off with the hose and at the same time work on desensitizing her to it. Again, I would spray her, and if she moved away, I'd just follow her while spraying until she stood still, and then I'd stop spraying. I'd praise her and then give her a short break. Before we'd start, I'd also give her a chance to check out the hose. I'd pull it and drag it along the floor just so she could get used to seeing it move like that and help her realize it's not a super long snake. The only thing she didn't like so much was getting her face sprayed. She would raise her head up really high to avoid the water. All I would do was just spray her face while putting pressure on the lead rope, and when she'd lower her head, I'd stop spraying. Even if she threw her head up super high, I wouldn't stop spraying until she came back down, and eventually she learned to just lower her head on her own whenever it was time to rinse her face. Alright, finally, I worked on teaching Brandy how to quietly stand tied. Some call it the patience pole or the knowledge post, but Brandy still needs a little more work with that. She likes to paw at the ground. As a yearling, I tried to only tie her for no more than 20 minutes, but standing quietly when tied is super important, especially if your horse is trailered a lot to different places like shows, rodeos, or trails. I'm always paranoid that a horse is going to get hurt when I see them all nervous, pawing, and prancing while tied. The main reason why I think it's important is because it helps prevent them from getting injured, in my opinion. It gives me peace of mind knowing that I can walk away and my horse won't be freaking out at the trailer or wherever they're tied. I know that seeing everything put together in one video like this seems like a lot, but these were not really things I did every single day. The top most important thing for me was to let her be a baby. I wanted to give her a lot of room to grow and be a horse, and there was always going to be time for training in the future, aka now. So I never took it too seriously and there was never any rush.
Alright you guys, that is it. Hopefully you enjoyed watching. Again, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Please subscribe and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!